Hello, everyone. Welcome to Creative Writers and Illustrators, episode number 35. I'm going to be talking to Mallika Ravikumar, author of The District Cup, a young adult novel from Penguin Random House, India. Welcome, Mallika. Thank you so much for joining us all the way from Italy.
No, thank you. Thank you so much, Shamala. From Portugal, not
Oh,
Italy.
Portugal. I'm so sorry.
Yes.
Portugal. Right.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me, Shamala. It's great to be on Kahani Takbak once again.
Yeah. So let's talk about the book, right?
Yeah.
What made you write this book? Because when I was reading it, okay, I thought this book kind of opened, it was like opening a Pandora's box. There are so many issues which a reader, a layman has never thought of, right? So what made
Yes.
you write this book?
Right. So the starting point is actually very different from where the book actually ended. So the starting point was really my kids. They used to read Harry Potter all the time. They finished reading all the Harry Potters. They started reading book one again. They finished it and they kept reading the same books. And I said, I'm happy you're reading, but read other things also sometimes. And they said, no. I said, there are other kids who read my books and they write, notes saying we enjoyed it, we appreciated it, but you seem to be not reading any of the things I write. So they said, but you don't write anything that we want to read. And I said, okay, what do you want to read? And they said, you write about football and we'll read. So it's sort of a challenge that I guess they thought, what am I going to write about football? Because it was really not my cup of tea. And then that idea kept gnawing away inside, that maybe I can try. And then a character formed and a plot slowly formed. And once you start, as a writer and as a storyteller, you know how it is. There's a seed planted in your head. It's like a kida, like they say, you keep thinking about it. And I thought, okay, let me try. And then I wrote out an outline. The kids liked it, and then I just took a shot and sent it to a couple of publishing houses. And Puffin said, the World Cup is coming up. Yes, we would like to work on it. So that's that starting point, which is very different from what it ultimately turned out to be, a story about age fraud and very serious things. It didn't start with the intent of exposing these ideas to kids or anything. It just started at a completely different point.
So I think your biggest success with this book is, weaving multiple threads, and then, it's like weaving a tapestry.
Right.
There's so many different difficult perspectives that you managed to pull through, and congratulations, because this is your first young adult book, and I think it
Thank you.
was like literally putting your hand into the lion's mouth. How did
Yes,
you
yes.
pull it off?
Yeah, I'm happy you're saying it's a young adult book, because for me also that is what I thought, that it is for older kids, because there are very subtle things about, bribing, but not overtly bribing the referee in a game and things like that, which I thought younger children will not understand. And so it was marked as 12 plus by Puffin. But yesterday, a mother, wrote to me, and she's put a post on Instagram, a very heartwarming review, where she said her 7-year-old read and enjoyed the book. So I really, I mean, children are reading, far more mature than I think we were when we were kids, and we were reading very kiddie books at 7 and 8. But there are 7 and 8-year-olds who are reading this book. And yes, I have had friends of mine who've read the book and said that this is actually an adult's book. So I don't know. It's very difficult to categorize this. I guess it straddles two different areas, as adults like it, young adults like it, kids like it. But yeah, it does, like you said, I have a lot of web of complex issues. Age fraud is a central theme of the book. Corruption in Indian sports is another central theme. But then you also have personal, that is a larger picture, but you also have the micro conflicts where, a father who doesn't want the child to play, or a grandmother who doesn't want a girl, her granddaughter to become dark in the sun, because, girls shouldn't be playing out in the sun. Those kind of Indian traditional notions. You have other struggles that other players face. Mangya, who's from a economically not privileged background, he has his own struggles. So there are many, because it's a team sport, I didn't want to highlight only one person and, he was the protagonist. Of course, there is a central protagonist who's Prithvi, but I wanted to show that everybody in the team has their own struggles. Even Siraj, the coach, has his own struggle with his family issues and his child. But that everybody is so passionate about football that they leave behind their personal struggles to come together as a team and achieve a certain goal together. I think that was what I wanted to show, because that is what, success in sport. All are great sportsmen. I'm sure they all have their own struggles and problems, but they tide through that and then they shine. So that is something that I wanted to highlight.
So football is a visual game. You blink and you will miss a crucial moment.
Yes.
So was it challenging capturing the entire game through words? there is a lot of football technical, you come across a lot of technical words in the book.
Yes, yes. Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it was not my cup of tea. I've grown up, like most Indians, watching a lot of cricket, but
Mm.
not so much football.
Mm.
This generation of Indian kids are watching a lot more football, but when we were young, people used to watch more cricket.
Mm.
So football was completely the football lingo. There were many things I didn't know, but I've learned a lot as a mother because both my children play football, and they've been playing actively for some time. So I've learned a lot by just being present at their practice sessions and matches and games and all that.
Mm.
But still, it was a struggle because there were many things that you watch as a spectator is different from actually writing a scene where certain
Yes.
things have to happen in a certain way. And I did make mistakes. My children actually did help in correcting those mistakes. I also sent it out to a friend who happened to be a budding sports lawyer and a keen footballer, and he told me, that if, for example, if the midfielder is kicking from this angle, then the goalie cannot dive at this angle. He has to dive, on the right side and not. So these kind of small nuances which I didn't get right, but there were a lot of people who did correct those mistakes, and therefore you see all those technicals more or less. I think I've got it right, and I put a glossary at the end for people like me who wouldn't have known what those terms are. So that I think is also helpful. But I did take a lot of training also for me. I had to constantly keep reading up. What happens if there's a 9v9, because this is not 11 versus 11 game as you see in adults. Children play a 7 versus 7 or 9 versus 9 as they grow.
Mm.
So then the field is different, what positions you have to play, and so those kind of things which I had to learn a lot about before writing it. But it was a great learning journey for me through this whole writing experience.
So age fraud is a central theme. So is how
Yes.
prevalent is that in India? And you've been like in and out of India. So do you think it's prevalent in other countries too?
So yes, age fraud, when I got into this, I didn't realize how big a problem it is. I thought, it happens in a few cases, and I have personally seen it. Like I said, my kids play, so I have been at multiple tournaments with them, and I have seen it happen, play out in front of my eyes. But I thought, these are like few exceptional cases, and it may be happening in some cases. But then I started researching about it, and I found that it is a very serious problem. It is rampant all through football, and other sports as well. In fact, it would be, it's shocking to hear, but the under 19 player who won the cricket world, Indian team under 19 won the cricket World Cup a few years ago, the men's team, men's under 19. And one of the key players, I think he was a man of the match in that game, he was then found to be an age cheat. And India won the World Cup based on his performance, the under 19 World Cup. So it's happening at the highest levels. It's happening in cricket, in football, in other sports as well. And it is hampering India's performance at an international level, because all these age cheats, they come through to an advanced level, because if a 13-year-old is playing 11-year-old, he seems like a better player on the field because he's actually stronger, bigger built, faster, and so on, but he's not technically better than the 11-year-old who is playing at his own level or her own level. So the age cheats then are outstanding on the field. They get selected, they keep going through to the next stages, and then when they're in the senior category and they have to face international competition, that's when it hits you that really they're not technically as sound as you thought they were. They were just much older than their competition, and therefore seemed better, and therefore got selected. So it does hamper India's performance in the long run. Also, there are some very detailed articles by sports journalists, and some of them I've put. There is a QR code at the back of the book that leads to a link on my website where I have put all these articles, put up all these articles by sports journalists who have really done a great expose about age fraud and how it is so prevalent in Indian football. And one of the journalists I spoke to, he worked on it. It's a long form article, and he'd worked on it for a few months, and he said he was so depressed after this investigative report that he wrote, that he couldn't write anything for a few more months. So it was really something that hit him hard. So it is a rampant and very serious problem. It's not just a figment of my imagination or a few stray cases that happen, but it happens. It's very, very common, and it's quite very, very serious.
So is there anything which can be done? Obviously it happens because the system supports it, right? So is
Yes.
there anything which can be done to curb it?
Right. So I've also, during my research, spoke to people in the All India Football Federation, AIFF, people who were involved in youth football and had tried to put in measures to curb age fraud. And they told me that the problem is so rampant that it's impossible to fight it. And the reason is not only because, and I, like in the book also, you see, I blame the parents and the coaches and not so much the kids. The kids are just doing whatever, they are told to do. But it is, the competition is not just because you want to get into some team, but also because of sports quota jobs that you get. And so if you shine, if you get a certain, get into the state team or whatever, you might, like somebody in the book does get a railways job because of sports quota and so on. So there are other pressures, economical pressures, that compel people to take that route. It's not like, people are morally bankrupt and therefore doing it. There are pressures on people in a country like India which makes them do that. But also the system is there are birth registration, for example. If you're born, again, in a case that happens in the book, someone is born in a remote place in a tribal area in a mountainous region, you may not have registered the birth, and so you have a system to enter the birth records later by giving an affidavit saying, yes, this child is this age. So there are systems to help, but those are being misused by people who want to misuse and abuse the system to perpetrate age fraud. And then that is there are problems, and one can't just say that people are doing this because they want to cheat and because they are morally bankrupt, like I said. But there are economic pressures, there are other pressures that compel people to do this. But as a system also, there are measures that can be put in place to make sure that the footballers, when they enter the system and the child plays this for his or her first tournament, is registered. A central registry should be in place. But these things have not happened so far, but hopefully they will happen. Things are happening to football is becoming more and more popular, and things are happening to put systems in place. So hopefully this menace will also be curbed. That this is an issue, like you asked earlier, that it was happening in other countries also. I spoke to a coach in Portugal a few days ago, and he said when he was young, it was an issue in Portugal also. So there are, other countries have been through this. In African countries, you see this problem as well. But I'm sure, in another decade or so, this might be behind us. I hope it is behind us.
I like the way you dealt with Saksham and Cristiano. There is, they're not kind of punished because they are part of the age fraud. The emphasis is on the adults because they're mere pawns in the game.
Absolutely. Yes.
So all you can do is feel sympathy for these characters.
Yeah, absolutely. In many cases, the sports, even if it is a case of doping, or like you see now the Russian Ukraine conflict, a lot of sports people who are not like, there is a the Ukrainian government has asked that Russian sportsmen should not be allowed to play the Olympics next year. So sports, the players really, they are athletes and they want to play. But even in the World Cup, you saw that, because the sportsmen being embroiled in wearing bands and making political statements because Qatar had certain laws against LGBT and so on. So very often the players become pawns in larger conflicts and larger statements to be made. Likewise, even in the book, you see, the children, no child grows up saying, I want to cheat or I want to play in a category which I shouldn't be playing in. But other pressures compel them to do it. And once you're in that situation, if you're banned or if you are, there is a punishment that if you're caught out and you're punished, again, it's not really your fault, but you have to bear the consequence of that. But it's really, yes, like you said, they are just pawns in adults who are moving these pawns around to suit their to benefit themselves.
You've done a whole lot of research for this book, so many angles, so many different perspectives. And I also like what you've done, bringing the spotlight on women's football. There was data you shared. I was like, oh, really? I didn't know that. We don't talk about it. We don't read about it. It's like you don't talk, you don't read. It's like it never exists.
Yes. Right? Absolutely. So, my children, I have two boys. So the teams that they play in, there have been girls playing in their teams, but and they have friends whose sisters play and so on, but there is no girls team. I saw that the girls have to play with, like, there'll be a team of 7 boys, if it's a 9v9 game, 7 boys and 2 girls and things like that. And very often you'll see when children are playing football, most of them will be boys and there'll be a couple of girls. And that problem is because there are not enough girls playing, so the girls can't have a team of their own, so they have to play with the boys. And then there are certain, certain angles of prejudice that then come in, and girls shouldn't be playing. Like you see in the book, some characters say, why should you, don't give importance to the girls. And then you have other pressures that the girls have, like this girl's grandmother who says you shouldn't play, you should be dancing or studying or doing other things. Playing with little shorts is not a very girly thing to do. And so other pressures that girls face about their clothing, about what they should be doing, about the color of their skin, not playing out in the sun, various other things, personally and on the field, at home and on the field. So that is something I always felt, although I have two boys, as a mother, as a woman myself, I feel there is a great amount of prejudice that girl players would do face. And I wanted to also highlight that, because that is a real problem. So of course there are many other issues, and the book has chosen to highlight a few of them, but these are real issues that players face, girl players face.
So as a soccer mom, you have come across a whole lot of challenges in the football arena. So what is the biggest challenge faced by football players in India today?
Young players, I think one of the problems is, at least I was in Mumbai, so 3 or 4 months of the year nobody can play because of the rains. It's raining so heavily there. So a calendar where you have only 8 months then left, and then the summer, April, May, very, very hot. So if you see, like now, since I live here, I see the calendar. Kids are playing all through the year. Kids are playing multiple games in a week. So in anything, like if I'm writing, the more I write, whether I'm blogging or I'm writing for pleasure, I improve my craft by writing. If you're a chef, you keep trying various things, and that's how you improve. So if you don't get to play for at least 4 or 5 months in a year, you're reducing the amount of game time a child gets, and that therefore reduces how much they can improve, or harms their potential in that sense. So that is one, that there is not enough game time, there are not enough tournaments happening, not enough teams to play. Especially if you're in a small town, like in the case in the book, where you don't have enough teams, you don't have enough tournaments happening, things get cancelled. Like because of COVID, we had so many things getting cancelled. So your game time is reducing, and the lesser you play, obviously your quality is going to suffer. So I think that is, even see, football coaches in India say that we need kids to play more, and whatever it is. And the focus very often I've seen is winning a tournament, or winning a medal, or getting a certificate, or and not about improving in quality. So you may a team may thrash an opponent 17-0, and everybody is very happy, but that serves no purpose, because the other team was so weak that your players dominated, and of course they won. But did it help them become better? That in the long run, thrashing somebody who is much weaker than you is not going to help you become a better player. So the focus is not so much on long term, but on short term things like, oh, my kid won this, or I won this tournament, and that's the end of the story. So those, I think, are problems that Indian kids do face in the football, or maybe in other sports as well.
So what you're saying is the final outcome becomes important, then the process of improving and strengthening your position as a footballer.
Yes, yes. I think that is maybe true of other fields as well also, where you want your child to win some competition which happens in school or wherever. And but that is not the end, that by beating somebody who's much weaker, your child hasn't really achieved anything, but you have this false sense of achievement because you have some glittering trophy in your hand or a medal around your neck. But in the long term, it really hasn't helped you improve, because your competition itself was so weak that you haven't really improved for your benefit in the long run. So the focus is very, it's myopic and short term. I think that is something that is definitely a problem.
So I was surprised to see you capture the voice of Siraj and Maitri. They are adult characters, and it's quite unusual to see an adult's voice in a young adult book. But yet these voices are important. It is important to know what a mother goes through. It is important to capture the moments from a coach's perspective.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think even if generally a story, when I'm reading a story also as a reader, I think it gets enriched when you have multiple voices and not just the voice of one person or two people, the protagonist and the antagonist. Then you're seeing it only through their viewpoints. But once you see it through, like, even this new category of we have a lot of books these days on mythological fiction, where you have the Mahabharata from Draupadi's perspective, or you have the Ramayana from Urmila's perspective, characters that you don't haven't paid attention. Draupadi, of course, yes, but Urmila, for instance, a character who doesn't even, you don't pay much attention to when you're reading the usual story. But suddenly you start thinking about it differently from that new character's perspective. So I think it enriches the narrative. It makes you think of multiple points of view, which you otherwise may not have, may not have occurred to you. So I was, even as a reader, I like reading multiple points of view. So I think that really reflects then in my writing as well, because I think the story is that much richer because you have adult, children, young adult, grandmother, different people and their voices. I think then it brings out the conflict really, because it shows how complex the situation really is. And it's not only black and white, but there are a lot of areas of gray in between.
Yeah. So family support is also something which you focused in your book. Prithvi's family support. On one hand, his father is like totally against him, and then the mother is like, she's the torchbearer and says, there's the Ajoba character who kind of encourages him. So, how important do you think family support is, in today's times?
Right. So especially, sports, given that Indian families are traditionally more inclined to academics. So as far as, they would rather a child study than go out and play or paint or sing or dance or any of these extracurricular activities, as we bunch them all together under some sort of lesser umbrella that, even in our schools. So my son, for example, says every day we have English and maths, but we have PE only twice a week. So you can see that sort of priority in the way a school is structured or activities are structured. So in case a child is talented in sport, given that the formal structures itself have, given it less priority, then the parent really becomes key in helping the child, transcend those hurdles and go ahead, especially because if you're spending 5 hours of a day after your school on the field, clearly your grades are not going to be great in school, most likely. And if you're going to constantly put pressure on the child to say nahi padhai bhi karni hai and sports karna hai, that is okay, you can play, but provided you get so and so grades in school, then it is at some point the child is going to have to choose, and many kids face that choice ultimately in senior classes and they give up sports. So I think the parent really has to be understanding, supportive, and say, okay, I'm okay with you not getting, whatever grade I would like you to get, and I will support you, and I will, even financially. Sometimes, some sports, football, of course, is not that draining financially, but it's sports like tennis and so on, even the racket costs so much. So financially the parents will have to support if a child is playing some of those sports. If you're swimming, then you need to find a swimming pool somewhere and a constant membership to a place where you can swim. So there are and facilities are not so easily available in India. So there are many ways in which parental support becomes absolutely crucial.
You also touched upon racism in football.
Right. Yes. Yes, I do. So because football, a lot of even our national team, lot of players are from the Northeast, and yet you find there is this narrative in mainland India that they use pejorative terms like chinky and chili chicken and things like that for people from the Northeast, which of course, as we know from many stories that come out now, that it is abhorred by people there. They don't like it, and it is disrespectful. It is not. It shouldn't happen. And given that so many players in our national team are from the Northeast, and you still have, I mean, our captain Sunil Chhetri and so many others, and still on a field, you feel you hear words like this. It is of course shocking. So I think I wanted to highlight that, especially because Northeast is such a hub of Indian football today, that I wanted to also touch upon the not in a major way, but I wanted to in passing mention this as well. And then where and the other players as well, in that scene where the kid from the Northeast is targeted, but the other players don't say anything. So because of your silence, it gets there is encouragement to such behavior. So that is also something I wanted to show.
Sensitivity training has to be included, I think, right from school. It's not
Correct.
just because somewhere these lessons have to be inculcated in school, at home, at every other opportunity a person gets, because I think the normalizing this whole uh, issue,
Hmm.
it's not acceptable, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
And there is a whole diverse cast of players in your book. So how did you go about that?
Yeah, so that was one of my fears, that there are so many characters that kids might get confused. But I didn't have a choice because this is not an individual sport. So, it's not like a badminton player and then his or her coach and parent, but it's a football team, and it's a team so that it has multiple players and their families. And then because you're playing, you have an opposing team, so you have those players and you have their families. So it is a, multiple cast sort of story. And I did fear sometimes that children might get confused ki who is who and who is playing in which team. And I still feel sometimes that a child might get confused, but given that young children as young as 7 and 8 are reading the book, I think there is clarity, and therefore I needed to add certain characteristics to each. So for example, Prithvi has his he I made used some Marathi words like azoba is grandfather in Marathi. For Kadambini's grandmother, I've used party, which
Mm.
is clear that she's from Tamil Nadu. So so those words, sort of help in separating these characters and associating some characters, the family members with the characters. So I've used Indian native languages to help clarify certain things, and I've used certain behavioral characteristics to and of course description. Some people have beards, some people have mustaches, so on. Those are normal ones, but I have had to do this to make sure there is less confusion, because that was one of my fears. Yes, it's a many characters in the story, but given it's a football story with multiple teams, I think there was just no other no other way out. I
I'm
couldn't
really
lessen the cast.
waiting to see what you're going to write next, because Tracing Roots is all about nature. And then
Yes.
there's Of Revolutionaries and Brave Hearts, which is around
Yes,
kids'
right. Yes,
movie.
yes.
And then the
Yes.
District Cup, which is totally on
Football.
football. So
Yes, yes.
I don't know what kind of motivates you to write on diverse subjects, but it's
Yes, I
working out. So
actually
yes, good.
that actually again reflects my reading, because I like reading. I have this eclectic mix of things I read, and I think that ultimately reflects on what I of course I steer clear of science and mathematics and things which are totally not my cup of tea. But yeah, this I'm working on a book with Hatchet called 565, which should hopefully be out this year, which is a saga of the accession of princely states.
Okay.
And that should hopefully be out, and another one with Karadi, which is about birds. So let's see. Yes, again, very different topics, but that really reflects my interest in various things.
And you are a success, so I guess
Thank
you should
you.
keep on
Thank you so
repeating,
much.
what works.
Thank you so much. Yes, I hope there is enough interest in District Cup that there would be a sequel at some point. That's what I was discussing with my editor. That what happens to Prithvi next. He goes to an academy. So what happens? But let's see if there has to be enough interest in the book, and the book should do well, and the publisher should then be interested. So let's see.
And
We'll
it
take it as
boils
it
down to the
comes.
story, because there are a whole lot of kids who are, who have been going abroad with
Yes,
scholarships, and they are shining. The results,
correct,
we've
correct.
still not seen the results. So I guess everything happens at its own time. So
Yes,
let's
absolutely.
talk about Tree Talk, your pet project, before we end the session.
Sure. Yes, so tree talk again happened coincidentally, because one day I was walking past, a strangler fig, and during my evening walk, and I saw it, and I said, okay, let me just film it and show it, tell my friends what's happening here. And it was a strangler fig. It was a people growing on a palm tree, and it was a short little video that I put up on Instagram and shared it with some friends, saying, did you know this happens? And so many people who I didn't know at all wrote to me saying, oh, this is fascinating. We have never noticed this. And I suddenly felt, okay, so there are so many people who are interested in trees and may not have noticed, because they've grown up in cities, they've not seen, they've not had time, they've been busy. So why don't I start it more formally instead of just making a random video here and there? And so then I, created, sat down and thought about it, a name for it, and so on. And now I put up, I think, 2, 3 videos. I have a YouTube channel called Tree Talk with Mallika Ravikumar. Uh, and an Instagram page with the same name. And I put up a couple of videos where it's not, where helping people identify trees, but also the ethnological and cultural aspects about those trees. Many trees play a role in our rituals, in our stories. In the Ramayana and Mahabharata, you have so many trees which have a role, but you only focus on the human characters. In so many of our everyday, cultural material life, trees play such an important role, from the oxygen in our lungs to to our furniture around, to the food we eat, and yet we know so little about them. And because I saw this interest coming suddenly because of that random video, that sparked an idea, and I thought, let me do it more formally and systematically. So every month I put out about 2-3 videos, and on both the Instagram page and the YouTube channel. And there seems to be, slowly the interest is growing.
So thank you, Mallika. Thank you. All the best. I think this is a book you should be proud of. Quickly tell our readers
Thank you so
why
much.
they should read the District Cup.
Okay. So the District Cup, if you like football, I think I don't need to give you any reasons to read it. This is a football story, so that should nail it. And it's a football story about Indian kids playing in India, and because you read so many football books, but football stories set in the West, but this is very Indian, set in an Indian city, Indian imaginary city in India, with Indian characters and themes and problems and conflicts. So that is a good reason for you to read it. And if you're not a football fan, well, this isn't football heavy, pummeling you with only football and games and concepts, but it is also a story of that you may face in your life, of struggles that you have against for whatever you're passionate about, and how a group of children who are passionate about something, and a coach who are passionate about something, tide through all the hurdles they face to get to their goal. So that's all that you'll find, and a lot of interesting characters and conflicts, and how they tide through those conflicts. So that's why you should get the District Cup.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mallika. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shamla.